Welcome to Global Television Network Special. My name is Pastor David Longobardo, and it's our privilege to be with you. We have a very exciting broadcast. Our guest is Dr. Mark Williams. Dr. Williams is a physician, he's a songwriter, he is a vocal artist, a worship leader, but most of all, he is a godly husband and a godly father and a godly example. And we're going to be focusing in today on a book that he has written, a very relevant book called When a Man Worships. Dr. Mark, good to be with you today.
I am delighted to be here with you as well. Thank you so much.
When a Man Worships, a great topic, a needed topic.
Yes.
As a man who's been a pastor for 45 years, I can tell you that a book like this can answer a lot of questions, because the role of a man as the priest of his family is essential to any stable home. What provoked you? What evoked you to write When a Man Worships?
Well, I'll tell you, the book itself was birthed from a CD that I recorded several years ago. The CD was also entitled When a Man Worships. And so I was inspired to write the CD and the songs on the CD and record that, because I noticed that there was a deficiency of men who actually worship and understood what worship was. And a lot of times we think, particularly in the church, that some of the songs may not necessarily move men the way that they may move to women. And I don't know, but in a lot of the African American church, we're really concerned sometimes that some of the music may threaten our machismo. Some people may have that perception. So I wrote a CD. I wrote a CD full of songs that of a style of music that I call smooth praise. It's smooth jazz with a gospel message. And I did that because I wanted to create what we call dude worship for people.
Before we go further, we have some dude worship for you off of that very CD. Enjoy Dr. Mark as he sings and worships with this song.
Hey. Oh, oh, when a man worships, he'll fall down on his knees, and he don't worry about his problems, no, long as he believes he can call on the Father, and he'll provide his every need. When he needs a healer, a savior, a keeper, he calls on his God and came. When a man worships, his mind stays on God when he worships. Oh yeah, he won't be tempted. No. When a man worships, he'll know how to treat his woman right, his family and his children. Oh, they'll keep him on his knees at night. He'll lead, he will guide and protect them, even if it costs him his life. 'Cause he knows the Father is a priest and provider, and he knows his strength comes from God. When a man worships, when a man worships, his mind will stay on the Lord. When a man loves God, yeah, he won't be tempted. No, 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 no. And he'll do anything for the sake of his family. Surrender is all for the love of God. Lord, I'll never leave you. Lord, I'll never let you down. Long as I live, long as I have breath, I will. When a man said a good man will bow down when he worships. Yeah. When a man worships Jesus, that means everything he has, it belongs to God. Hey. When a man loves God, nothing else matters but Jesus. I surrender my God. I surrender my family. I surrender my all. Oh, yeah. When that man worships, he'll say, here I am, Lord. Here I am to worship you. Oh, 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 oh. When a man loves God, his heart is surrendered.
Outstanding. What a voice.
Oh, praise God.
Just beautiful. And the words to that song are powerful.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about this book, When a Man Worships. Mm-hmm. I'd like to begin in a very interesting way. Mm-hmm. Talk for a moment about Dr. Mark's worship life.
Well, when I explain what Dr. Mark's worship life is, we have to first explain what worship is.
Yes.
Now, in the book, I define worship as being obedience to and subservience to the sovereignty of God. And the reason why I do that is because in the Old Testament, there's really only one word that describes worship, at least worship that's offered to God. And that word is shakal, which means to do obeisance or to prostrate oneself. And so when we think about worship, a lot of times our first images that come to mind is people raising their hands or bowing at the knee or singing a song, or even for that matter, gathering in a church together. And those are expressions of worship, but they may not necessarily be the heart of worship. When when Abraham told his servants, he said, wait here while I and the lad go to worship. He said, wait here while I go obey what God says.
Exactly.
So Dr. Mark's worship really is characterized by being obedient and subservient to God in everything that I do. And so my entire lifestyle then has to reflect worship. Whether I sing a song, whether I raise my hand or anything, it's all about being subservient to the sovereignty of God.
Having grown up in the church and been a part of the church most of your life, as you well know, our lady believers tend to be larger in number, tend to be more participatory in terms of their service in the church. In your relationship in the church, what prompted you to see the importance of men becoming worshipers?
Yeah. Well, this is actually the reason why we wrote the book. When I recorded the CD, a friend of mine, a dear friend, it was another woman, she said, after listening to the CD, she said, this needs to be a book because men need to understand the importance of their presence and the importance of the worship that they offer, their position as worship leaders. And when we think about worship leaders, we always think about the person with the microphone, but that's not necessarily the worship leader that God is looking for. He's looking for men to worship in their homes, to submit their lives to God, to his sovereignty, and to be the leaders. Now, there's some research out there that shows that if a child is the first in the family to come to Christ, that there's probably about a 3% chance that the entire family would do it. Mm-hmm. If the wife or the woman or the mother in the family would be the first one, it's maybe about a 17% chance. Mm-hmm. But if the man is the first one to come to Christ, it's about a 93% chance that the entire family will then come to Christ and be saved. That, I think, underscores the tremendous importance of men understanding their role as priests of the household, not only just for their household, but for the communities and our nation at large. It is so imperative that men understand the importance of them being as, if not more, actively involved in some of this church service and also the worship leading for the household.
Take us for a moment, because I know that there's some men listening that, how do I practically do this? Take us for a moment in your own personal family, your own personal life, and give us some handles that any man watching right now, a husband, a daddy, could say, okay, these are some practical steps that I can employ to become that man of worship in my family and for my family.
Yes. Well, it's simple. And I think we've overcomplicated worship because we've convinced people that if they can't sing or if they don't have the most beautiful voice, that they don't worship because we've minimized or diminished worship to be the singing of a song. Brothers who may not necessarily be able to sing, I want you to know that you can actually lead worship simply by submitting to the sovereignty of God and demonstrating that in your household. So in my household, my children understand that I am committed to God and that God's statutes are what I uphold, and that's also what I teach. But here's the key step for that. Jesus told the woman at the well, he said, you worship who you don't know. Yeah. We worship who we know. Yeah. You can't first demonstrate worship. You can't offer worship God if you don't first know who he is. That woman got into that place of learning about what true worship was and the type of worship that God was seeking, spirit and in truth. She got to that place because she acknowledged her thirst. And that thirst really is reflective of a separation from God. When Jesus hung on the cross, the one thing that Jesus complained about, Jesus could have complained about the stripes on his back. He could have complained about the thorns on his head. He could have complained about being mocked and beaten before he was hung. He could have complained about the stakes that were driven through his hands and through his feet. But the one thing that he said as he hung on that cross, he said, I thirst. And what that really meant was that for the first time in his eternal and earthly existence, Jesus was separated from God. And that was so devastating to him. Of all the other things that he endured, the one thing that he wanted to do was to be reunited with God. He said, if any man thirsts, let him come to me and I'll give him wells of living water. So we have to first, men in your household, the first thing you have to do is you have to thirst for God, thirst for relationship, recognizing that you're separated from him, and then work hard to develop that relationship and knowing who God is so that we can know who we worship.
I can so identify with what you've said because as a boy, my mother always wanted me to be in our church choir. She drugged me to choir practice. Our minister of music asked me not to be in the choir. and I said, give me the reason so I can tell my mother. He said, David, do you know what a monotone is? I said, no, sir. He said, you have that. He said, what that means is I said, I don't need to know I just need to be able to tell my mother. I can tell you this, while I don't have Dr. Mark's voice vocally, being a worshiper became the most important thing in my life and ministry before preaching, before leading, being a worshiper. And so as you so eloquently stated, any man
Yes.
can become that worshiper.
You know, I'll tell you, probably one of the times that I've sounded my absolute worst was, I believe, the time when God really was most pleased with the worship that I offered. I recall vividly at a church that I was at in Cincinnati, and I had just gotten on the worship team, and I really didn't want anyone to hear my voice because I thought that they would think that I didn't belong there. And during the time, there was a song that the Lord placed in my heart, and the worship leader at that time said, God has given somebody a song. I need you to sing it. And we just lingered there until it happened. And I started singing this song. It was Our God Reigns.
Yes.
And as I was singing it, it was horrible. And I said, please, I don't want to stop. God said, keep going, because what you're doing is you're obeying the commandment that I gave you. And that's the sweet sound that I'm looking for, is that obedience and not necessarily the melody that you're making.
We only have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask you something. Can women benefit from this book? And how?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, in the book, I define worship and lay down some biblical truths about what worship is. And so this is good for women and it's good for men. I always tell women also, you need to know what you should expect from your man as well. So as we look through that book, there's so many truths in there that is actually good for women and men.
The book and CD are entitled When a Man Worships. Before we're done with our broadcast, we're going to let you know how you can secure a copy of the CD, a copy of the book. But right now, we have a very special message from a very special friend, David Crabtree. Listen to this.
Hey friends, I'm David Crabtree, lead pastor at Calvary Church, and what a privilege it is to be talking with you today through the auspices of Global Television Network. If you're like me, you want to see the gospel available to people all over the world, and technology today has made it possible for us to literally shake nations. I love the work that Global Television Network is doing, and we need your help and support. You can help us by giving. You can help us by praying with us. Remember, we are Global Television Network, and we're located at 300 North Carolina Highway 68 South. You can write us there. Here in Greensboro, North Carolina at 27409. Or you can text us at 336-575-6577, or on the web, www.gtvnetwork.us. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're here for you. It's been a pleasure just to meet with you for a minute today. Remember, Global Television Network.
Thank you, David. Your prayers, my friends, and your support are what give us the ability to bring great guests like Dr. Mark into your home. Why don't you just prayerfully tuck in a gift and mail it off this week? It'll be such a blessing. Our guest is Dr. Mark Williams. He is a physician. He is a songwriter. He's a worship leader. He's a musical artist, and he is an author. We're talking about his book, When Man Worships, When Men of God Worship. And we're talking about the CD and the companion book that he has put together that will really make a contribution to any man becoming a worshiper, the priest and spiritual leader of his home. But as he said before we went to that little break, women can benefit from this as well. Doctor, talk to us about the fact that you are a successful physician. So in the workaday world, God has blessed you. In a practical sense, how does worship impact you as a physician? And how do you inculcate your role as a worshiper into your practice as a physician?
Well, I'll tell you, worship impacts every aspect of our lives, and it must impact every aspect of our lives, because we are not separated from God at any moment in time if we are continually worshiping God. The whole purpose of worship is so that we can restore communion and fellowship back with God. And when we have that restored fellowship with God, we hear him and we hear his voice clearly. And so God then directs our hands. I rely on God constantly to guide my hands as I'm operating on someone, as I'm making clinical decisions, And if there is some impediment between my relationship to be able to hear from God, that impacts my ability to function in my job. God speaks to me also when someone comes to the office, and it may mean that I spend a little bit of extra time sharing with them, not necessarily about their medical condition, but if I'm listening to and tuned into what God is speaking at that moment, I may need to just offer a word of encouragement to someone. And so worship then allows us to be able to stay in that constant communion with God, just as Adam walked in the garden with God in the evening, and he heard God's voice, and God constantly communed with him. This is what we can expect when men worship.
Martin Luther, one of the great reformers, used to say that the world is constantly trying to divide things into the sacred and the secular. He said, we as Christians cannot afford to fall into that trap. Yes. He said, for the believer, for the Christian, all of life is sacred.
Yes.
And that means that God has to be a part of all of life. When man worships, we only have a few more minutes left. Tell us about a particular chapter that means a lot to you and that can potentially mean a lot to those listening.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, in the book, we talk about the title chapter. Each one of these chapters in the book reflect a song title. And so the reason why I did that intentionally was so that when someone reads the book and then they listen to the CD, my hope is that the music will bring to their recollection what they read in the book.
Powerful.
The chapter that says when a man worships, that's particularly important to me because it speaks to marriages and how men conduct themselves in marriages. It's a sad testament that the divorce rate within the church is parallels, if not exceeds that
Absolutely
of the world. So that's a sad testament when we are to be the examples. When Christ used the marriage, the holy matrimony, to be an example of his love toward the church. And when we don't demonstrate that in our marriages, what type of images are we projecting to the world about the love that God has for the church? He told men, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and that he gave his life for the church.
Yes.
And this is what I like in this chapter. It says that he gave his life for the church. And often when we say that, we think about that he died for the church. He didn't just die for the church. He gave his life, which means that he gave his credit, he gave his deity, he gave his reputation, he gave his plan, his own initiatives, and his own motives. He gave all of those things and sacrificed them for the church. The good news is for the brother who's concerned that maybe I don't want to give everything up for my wife. The good news is that when Jesus did that, he did it so that he could create for himself a church that was without spot or blemish. And when we sacrifice like that for our wives, we create for ourselves the wives of our dreams.
We are talking to Dr. Mark Williams, a very successful physician, but also a very successful minister of the gospel in song and as an author of this book, When a Man Worships. We're going to bring his website information up. If you would like to make contact with him or obtain these resources, as he stated, the companion CD is a worship CD. The book, When a Man Worships, outlines in far more detail the concepts and realities of truth that he's speaking about in terms of men becoming worshipers. You can get this through Amazon.com, but you can also get it through his website. Access that information, secure that. It'll be a blessing and a benefit to you. We only have a couple minutes left. Mm-hmm. Last closing thought for the men and for those listening right now.
Yes. Well, in this time, and particularly in this season of social unrest, one scripture comes to mind, and it says, when a man's ways please the Lord, he'll cause even his enemies to be at peace with him. And as I look at that, when I'm confronted with some of the evil that's before me, I have to rely on the fact that God promised that if my ways are pleasing to him, that he'll cause even those people who rise against me to learn to be at peace with me. The second thing that he promised, he says, if your worship is acceptable to me, in Exodus, he says, an altar of earth you build unto me and sacrifice thereupon. Everywhere I record my name, which means that he says it's acceptable to me, he said, I'll come to you and I'll bless you. So blessings then become the byproduct of our worship.
Dr. Mark, thank you. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things that we as men stress out about will come our way. On behalf of Global Television Network, I want to thank you for being a part of this broadcast today with Dr. Mark Williams. I want to encourage you. Your prayers and your support are what give us the ability to bring great guests like this. We're bringing up our information. You can tuck in a gift to Global Television Network. You can mail that to 300 NC Highway 68 South, Greensboro, North Carolina 27409, or you can access our website at www.gtvnetwork.us. There you can access through Facebook, through other means, secure abilities to be able to give a gift online. Again, your prayers and your support are a blessing. Dr. Mark, thank you for being here. Great book, great CD. You're a great blessing. All the continued success to your practice and your ministry. Thank you for enriching the body of Christ with these resources. And thank you for being a part of Global Television Network. Tell your family and friends, join us in the future. Great programming coming your way that exalts the Lord and will build your faith. On behalf of Global Television Network, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again real soon with great programming from a great network because of a great God. God bless you.